and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another outstanding installment from very high above all the insipid and puerile forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Friday, July 3rd, the day before Independence Day. Just imagine, and maybe, I hope I'm not the only person that thinks this way, but just imagine what was happening July 3rd of 1776. I mean, we have this impression that everybody was about to party like it was 1776. That really wasn't the case. In fact, independence was not really all that popular at the time. But imagine what was happening behind the doors of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. The first draft of the Declaration was delivered on June 28th. So, you know, what we're talking about 3, 4, 5 days ago, 250 years in the past, of course. And they had debated it back and forth, and they'd changed things, and, you know, they'd probably agonized over every single word of what was in the Declaration. And then they finally got it. I mean, today they must have been fine-tuning. In fact, today they were probably still drafting the thing, because it's not like they could type it into a computer and, you know, the typist had it done in about 2.5 minutes. No, that's not how things worked. Quill and ink, and they probably went through a couple of different drafts of it. Yeah, because I'm sure whomever was doing the writing was pretty skilled, but, you know, still, I mean, it was on a big piece of parchment. And so you had to make a mistake or two, right? So I would imagine that today they were probably still putting quill to paper, quill to inkwell to paper, and getting the thing ready to go. And then they were all excited, and maybe not excited. And I don't know that was probably the feeling at the time, because everybody knew what the Declaration of Independence was. It was not a love letter. It was not, hey, Georgie, we really love you, and we hope the best for you. It's you. It's not me. I mean, it's me. It's not you. Well, it's everybody. We just don't want to be. We don't want to be together anymore. It wasn't that. They couldn't pick up their phone and text King George and say, hey, we're done. No, it didn't really work that way. What they were writing was a declaration of war. They were taking one of Great Britain's most profitable assets, the colonies, and for all of the things and all of the resources that were coming from the Americas at that time. So they were hacking off a big chunk of Great Britain's economy and their property and their land. I mean, this was no love note, no breakup letter. There was no Dear John letter in any of this. This was a declaration of war. Now, imagine the men in the room. What were they thinking? All right, so they had just they had all gotten together, 56 of them, by the way, probably a few more, but it was 56 people that signed the Declaration of Independence. They got together, And they decided, okay, we're going to craft this thing. And they've debated it now for several days, 250 years ago. And they all knew that everything was probably going to be ready on July 4th. And so do you think that they were excited to sign it? Considering how things turned out, I think that they probably all knew that when they wrote their name on the bottom of that piece of paper, what exactly that meant. It was a death warrant. It was them literally signing their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to this cause. And most of them did. And the reason why you don't know that many people that signed the Declaration of Independence is most of them died. Most of them were killed or captured, or they died penniless and, died in obscurity. The only reason you know the people that were involved is they were the ones that survived. But there were 56 of them total, and most of them did exactly what the last line of the Declaration of Independence says. We mutually pledge together our lives, our fortunes, with protection of divine providence. We mutually pledge our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. And they all did exactly that. And the only reason you don't know the names of all 56 of them is because most of them died pretty early on in the revolution. And some of them died shortly thereafter. Many of them, returned from fighting, and everything that they owned had been burned to the ground, and they had nothing left. So today on the program, we're going to reflect on that. And we're not going to spend 2 hours talking about the Declaration of Independence, but we're going to spend a big chunk of it. I want to know what you think, what your feelings are on the Declaration of Independence. It's July 3rd. Do you have the same feelings about our country that they did in 1776? Are you a little bit worried about what our country is going to be like next year, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? I want to hear. And so put your thoughts in the comments. If you want to call, it's Open Line Friday. That's right, my friends. It is also Open Line Friday. This is the day where we talk about whatever you want to talk about. You see, during the week, if I actually turn the phone lines on, which, by the way, is more often than not, but during the week, you kind of have to be on my schedule, doing things my way. But not on Friday, not on Open Line Friday. Today, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. And so the phone number to talk to me is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. That's the number right here in the studio if you want to talk to me. I encourage you to do so. I got to tell you, my friends, July 4th is next to my anniversary, is my favorite day of the year. It probably even trumps my birthday. I spend a lot of time just reading the Declaration, thinking about it. I'm often broadcasting on the day before Independence Day, and so I'm probably talking about it too. So it's a really cool day. And if you want to talk about it, there's the phone number, 307-374-8989. Or if you don't really feel like talking and you'd rather just listen and drink your coffee, that's fine too. Go ahead and drop me a note in the comments, and we will we'll take it from there. So anyway, we had a debate last night in Sheridan, and I have to tell you, I took a tremendous amount of crap over this debate. I can't tell you how many emails I got before the debate, and it was all, we need more information. We don't think this is going to be fair. Who wrote the questions? Who is the moderator? And then they go pick up their binky. So a tremendous amount of crap from all corners. And, I get it. All right. I totally understand. I am the owner of this program. I know exactly who I am. I'm firmly aware of who I am. So I get a little bit of trepidation. But what I don't understand is questioning somebody's integrity before you know anything about them. And so last night, we proved it to them that we can run a debate and that everything is going to go swimmingly. And so, and I don't think that I really explained how this thing was going to work, because I think it was kind of ingenious. Of course I do. I came up with it. But anyway, we had 6 candidates. And I think that it is pretty impossible to run a coherent debate with any more than 4 or 5 people on the stage. I mean, it just turns into just a forum, and it's opinion, and there's no back and forth, and there's no actual debating that happens because people don't have enough time to develop their ideas. And so what I did is I broke up the 6 people into 2 different groups. So 3 and 3, all of them drew numbers. So all of this thing was pretty random. So they all drew numbers 1 through 6. In the first group, it was numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then 4, 5, and 6 in the second group. And it ended up being I don't know if I would call it a spirited debate. There were points where the candidates went back and forth a little bit, especially when we started talking about property taxes and giving money to nonprofits and all of that crap. But one thing I thought would be more popular than it actually was is during the debate, I told them, all right, here's the times, and each of you will get 3 minutes to open up on any given topic. And then the second person to speak will get the first rebuttal, and then the first person to speak will get the final rebuttal on that topic. And we just went down the row, back and forth, and everybody got equal speaking time. But the other thing that I did, and I think I'm going to continue to do this. By the way, on the 7th in Upton, I am moderating the Wyoming Republican Party Superintendent of Public Instruction debate, which is going to be held in Upton at the Upton High School. That is on the 7th at 6 o'clock, I think. But I'm moderating that one, and I think I'm going to run it exactly the same. And hopefully we get 3 candidates. If you don't have 3, well, then the timing is going to be a little bit different. But I threw one curveball at him. I'm a big fan of baseball, but I threw a curveball at him. And that was that you had 2 minutes during the entire course of the debate, and I think each panel went for roughly 45 minutes ish. But through the course of the debate, they had 2 minutes that they could use at any point in the debate. And so even if it was out of turn, even if it was right before their turn, wherever they wanted to use it, they could say, hey, Mr. Moderator, I would like to use 1 of my minutes. And only one person did that. But I thought that would be way more popular, right? Somebody just finishes talking, and invariably, at least me, somebody's going to say something that's going to pique my interest, and I'm going to say, oh, I got to respond to that one right now. Mr. Moderator, I need a minute. I thought that's how it was going to work, but it didn't turn out that way. Maybe it was just something new and, something different, but we're going to continue doing that throughout the rest of the debates. But it all went pretty smooth, man. Oh, and the rest of what I did, God, I'm so excited about how things turned out yesterday or last night. So we had a committee of people write the topics, and I cut them all into strips of paper, put them in a bowl, mixed them all up, and just drew them one at a time. So not even I knew what the topics of the debate were going to be or what order. Of course, I knew what all of them were. I helped write them. But I wouldn't know the order of when they were going to come out. And so with just totally at random. And I knew the setup was coming at the beginning of the debate because before we even started, there was somebody in the crowd that said, hey, so should we sequester the other people? Should we keep them out of the room for this part of the debate? And I looked at him and I said, no. That's not necessary. I've already figured that part out. It's fine if they sit here. And okay, so was there a little advantage to the second group because they got to see how this whole thing was going to work? Yeah. Okay, whatever. But that's the only advantage they had. But everything went smooth, and I have to show you this. Let me get it set up here. I'm sure that it may have hurt the heart of Sheridan Media just a little bit, having to, and I don't even know that they necessarily needed to do this, but I wonder if it hurt their heart a little bit to have to do this. Now, I'm not a great fan of the picture that they used, but whatever. Have to put me on the front page of things. I think it's great. So anyway, maybe you didn't get to see that again. Let me share the screen again, just so you can. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so yeah, so there it is. there's me on the front page. And of course, they have to pick kind of an unflattering picture, but they always do that. But having to put me on the front page, I bet it hurt their heart just a little bit. So anyway, my friends, that's the debate. I think it went great. Thank you for all the candidates for participating in it. And as it relates to Sheridan County, on the 13th, we're going to have the rest of the county offices, so sheriff, county clerk, and coroner. We'll do that on the 13th. And then on the 14th will be the state legislative debates. And those 2 dates, they're going to work a little bit differently because each one of the races only has 2 people running in it. So, but anyway, as we get closer, I'll make sure that everybody in Sheridan knows about that. All right, so on with the program. Let's begin this morning. And this, again, it's July 3rd. Tomorrow's Independence Day. I think it's important to kind of take stock of where we're at as a country. Where, we all say that we're pretty well divided. But a question for you. Do you think that we're any more divided now than we were in 1776? I don't know. Now, clearly that we have some pretty good divisions going on now. People seem to be pretty well polarized. But I wonder if that's just the size of the megaphone. The loud, a bunch of small people being very, very loud. I don't know that that's everybody. But just think about it in 1776. I doubt that many people knew what was happening in Philadelphia. I'm sure that there was some, rumblings of what was going on. But for the average person, I doubt that somebody way out in the boonies really understood what was happening in Philly at Independence Hall, simply because they didn't have the media that we do. And it took a long time for news to get from, New York all the way down to the South, or, Philadelphia all the way down to the South. So I doubt that the average person really knew. I mean, maybe they had seen an article. I mean, sure, there were probably plenty of pamphlets that were distributed complaining about the British and everything that was going on. But I don't know for the average Joe on July 3rd of 1776 if they were that divided. But shortly thereafter, I think that is definitely the case. Because separating from Britain, it wasn't overwhelmingly popular. And if you look to the amount of people that actually fought in the Revolutionary War, it's a really small number. It's most historians put it at around 3%. I've heard some say that it's upwards of 10%, but you had 2 very distinct groups. A bunch of people that said, hey, you know what? Life with the British is actually pretty good. We kind of like, being British. We've all been British the rest of our, for our whole lives. And so why shouldn't we continue doing that? So it wasn't that this was an overwhelming, issue. I think that it was pretty well split. And I doubt very seriously that there was, that there was that much going on. I think that people were probably pretty well divided as they are right now. Now, here's the difference. And Ken brings this up all the time. Often, not all the time. But he always says that, things were a lot more cordial, maybe 100 years ago, 150 years ago, when everybody was packing pistols and you had to be very careful what you said, because whatever you said might end up out in the street in a duel. Okay, so you got to think that, when you're talking to people, likely somebody might pull a pistol and smoke you right there. And so he often points to there's a big difference there. You see, while a lot of people in Wyoming do carry a pistol, it's not. I don't think it happens hardly ever where people say, "Let's go out in the street and settle this like men, and you count your 10 paces and I'll count my 10 paces and we'll draw." I don't really think that happens, but it did back then. That was kind of a regular thing. Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. Hamilton died. Okay, so there was that difference. Okay, so the rhetoric, I think, was probably way toned down than what it is today. Today, you can get on your Facebook page and you can go after somebody and you don't have to face them. You don't have to walk up to them and say, I think you're entirely biased and I think you're going to try to screw candidates. You can't, you couldn't just type that into your Facebook page in 1776. If you wanted to say that to somebody, you had to go find them. Or, I mean, you could talk behind somebody's back, but it's still going to end up the same. So very different, environment. But I doubt very seriously that this was a super, super popular idea. And I think if you judge, and here's another thing that you need to keep in mind. I've got a couple of stories in the stack of stuff talking about, and the first one we're going to hit this morning is that the majority of Democrats say that they would vote for a Democratic socialist, and they view socialism very favorably. Okay, so that's a pretty big divide between most of us, I think. Yes, socialism is gaining ground in some, larger metropolitan areas, and there are some kooks in Wyoming that think that socialism would be a great idea. All you have to do is go to one of these stupid No Kings protests, and you'll see the signs. I've showed you pictures of them on this program, to where you'll see people holding signs with swastikas on them and many socialistic ideas, healthcare now, and we don't have a king and all that crap. So there are some people, but I don't think it's a majority. But listen to this piece from Breitbart. A majority of Democrats say they would vote for a Democratic socialist, and they view socialism favorably. And I quote, most Democrats would vote for a candidate describing themselves as a Democratic socialist, a recent Economist YouGov poll revealed. The survey asked respondents, would you vote for a candidate who identified as a Democratic socialist? Now, I think I can say this pretty confidently, that this audience, that's a hard no. No, definitely not going to happen here. Across the board, though, a plurality of respondents, 45%, said they would not vote for such a candidate. Okay, so we're already talking about a small percentage, or a smaller percentage, of the people that responded to this poll. So it's not the majority, okay? But my guess is, and in any of these polls, they try to get equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats. It never actually works out 50-50, but they try to get pretty close to it. So they start out by saying that 45% say they would not vote for a socialist, followed by 29% who said they would, and 26% who remain unsure. All right, so really, this article is talking about the 29% of the people surveyed who would vote for a Democratic socialist. So we're already a little bit more than a quarter of the people, so still a small percentage. Predictably, the vast majority of Republicans, 85%, said they would not vote for a Democratic socialist. But for most Democrats, 62% said that they would do so. Further, only 11% of Democrats said they would not, and over a quarter, 27%, said that they're not sure. A plurality of independents, 40%, said that they would not vote for a Democratic socialist, compared to 24% who said that they would. An even greater majority, 73%, of self-described liberals said that they would support a Democratic socialist. And most 2024 voters of former Vice President Kamala Harris, 64%, said that they would as well. Only 5% of the 2024 Trump voters said the same. So again, and I can't emphasize this enough, when you're talking about any poll, it doesn't matter what it is, even the poll that we ran for the open range record for the congressional candidates, you got to talk about how the poll was conducted, because that makes a great difference in the results and what the results mean. Now, our poll, completely unscientific. The only thing that I can tell you about it is I know that there weren't any duplicate votes. And by that, I mean you couldn't get on your phone and vote twice for the same people, or twice in the same poll. Because what I did is I tracked all the IP addresses, took out the duplicates, and that was the poll results. So other than that, it was just an online poll, and I don't have any idea of who was a Democrat, who was a Republican. We didn't track any of that. So none of that with our poll. It's just a straight online poll. It is what it is. But this one, national polls with candidates, with opinions, with this one, it's pretty important that you look at the demographics of the poll. All right, so the survey also revealed that more Democrats view socialism more favorably than capitalism. 34% choosing socialism and 22% choosing capitalism. Additionally, 58% of Democrats view socialism in general favorably. The survey was taken June 26th through June 29th of 2026 among 1,606 respondents, and it has a plus or minus 3.2% margin of error. The rise of socialism in the Democratic Party has been well documented, making waves after New York City elected Zoran Mamdani. We'll get to him a little bit later. Evidently, he wasn't kidding about the warmth of collectivism. Anyway, and from, let's see here. And since then, Mamdani endorsed socialist candidates in the state, and they have ousted the establishment Democrats in their respective primaries. And since then, there's been a socialist elected in Colorado. Yet another reason why we should build that wall along the southern border. I've been telling you this for years. That thing is probably slightly less important than the wall at the actual southern border. So anyway, just keep that in mind. There's socialists running Colorado, as if any of you had any question about that. Let's see here. Quote, but still alarming that a majority of people are voting for socialists, said Rand Paul during a recent appearance on Breitbart News Daily. I wrote a book a few years ago, The Case Against Socialism, and in it we talked about some of the polls where, a majority of young people are thinking, hey, socialism sounds pretty good. Why don't we try it? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea at all. And actually, on this program, and this is a plug for the podcast, I have made a concerted effort to interview people that actually lived under socialism, and there are a number of those programs on the podcast, and all of them begin with the title "Escape from Socialism," and I think that there are 4 separate interviews with people who actually lived under socialism. And so if you know one of these Democrats who thinks that socialism is a great idea, send them one of those interviews. I mean, it's this program, and so you get a little bit of conservatism with it. But mostly it's interviews with people who actually lived there. One of my favorite friends, Ovi Muntean, he lived in communist Romania, which, if you know anything about the Soviet bloc countries, the communistic country, Romania was by far the worst. And that guy has some scary, scary stories of what life was like. But another interview with my friend Peter Videnka. He lived in the Czech Republic and Yugoslavia. Still socialist country, communist country, but slightly better than Romania. I mean, nothing is really good under communism, okay? But on a scale, yeah, Yugoslavia, better than Romania. And then another friend of mine, Maylene Salabaria, she lived in Cuba. So all of those interviews are on the podcast. And so, and I can't forget my friend Charlie Cole, who he worked in Russia, and he was a translator for a number of years. So he knows a great deal about the Soviet Union. So there's one of his interviews in there too. So socialism, communism, go listen to those things. It's really important that you understand the difference. And if I can say this one more time, it's July 3rd, okay? Tomorrow is Independence Day, July 4th. If there were ever a day where you could just take 5 or 10 minutes and think about how great things are in this country as opposed to every other country in the world. There are apologists in America. One of them was elected president. One of them tried to be president. There was no possible way that she was going to make it. But people running around the world telling other countries, hey, America's not that great. Really, your country, that's fantastic. This whole socialism thing, great. Oh, it's awesome. There are those people that are running around. But the truth is, even the poorest person in America, think about the poorest person that you know. They probably still have a cell phone, albeit it might be a prepaid phone that they struggle to keep on. but they still have one. And they still have, shoes on their feet. And they still have probably a change of clothes or two. That's far more wealthy than 90% of the rest of the world. And so whenever you have a passing thought that you say, wow, maybe America isn't that great, just think about it for a minute, because I'm going to show you a picture from Indonesia where a couple kissed on TikTok. All they did was kiss each other on TikTok, and it resulted in them being caned. See, that doesn't happen in America because we kind of think that you could love whoever you want to. But in other countries, no, that sort of stuff will get you caned. So anyway, a majority of people under this, majority of Democrats under this poll think that socialism is great. So probably not so much. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the program. Cowboy State Politics Live on a Friday. It's Open Line Friday, man, and it's July 3rd. I want to hear your thoughts. What makes America so friggin' great? Back in a minute. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
This is Brent Bean, a Republican for governor. Wyoming families know what matters: law enforcement, emergency services, and supporting strong schools, agriculture, and energy production. But state government keeps growing while priorities fight for resources. That has to change. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending and priority problem. Vote for me on August 18th, and I'll put Wyoming priorities first. I'll return taxes to you, the taxpayer, and make Wyoming number one. Paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The two guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on July 3rd, the day before Independence Day. Welcome to the program, my friends. And it's also Open Line Friday, 307-374-8989. That's the number to talk to me. And it also happens to be the number that's right here at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to talk to me, 307-374-8989. Or if that's too much to ask, you can always drop me a comment. Let's talk about what makes America this truly amazing place that it is. And one of the things that makes it truly incredible is that right now, this summer, well, I mean, it's going to happen. The primaries are happening in Wyoming. It's August 18th, and then, of course, in the November election. But most countries in the world don't get to vote for their leaders. And most of them are absolutely 100% sure that even if they do get to vote, the election is totally rigged. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't had rigged elections in America. I'm sure that we have. I'm like 95% sure that the 2020 election was totally rigged for a number of different reasons. But in most countries, there's no doubt that it's totally rigged. and that the candidate that wins is going to have like 95% of the vote, and there's no question. And by the way, there's probably a gun to your head forcing you to go vote and vote for the person that the government tells you to. So that doesn't happen here. Is there fraud? Yep, absolutely. And when we have the county clerk debate, I'm going to straight up ask both of them. And this is the one question that I don't care that's out in the public. They are straight up going to be asked, is there fraud? And what are you doing to stop it? And if you don't think that there's fraud, what are you doing to prevent it? So that's totally going to be a question. By the way, I mean, I don't tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell the people running for the county clerk, they are going to answer that. And if last night's crowd was any indication, there's going to be a lot of people watching. And I can tell you that a lot of people were watching online. So, okay, back on topic. America is an amazing place, and there's so many cool things about the country that we live in that don't happen in other places in the world. And anytime that you get bummed out about our country, something happens in some other place, you should just sit down and think about all of the cool things that you can do here, that you can actually speak your mind and not go to prison. In Great Britain, in England, you have to be very careful about what you say. There are a number of conservatives who have been arrested right as they've walked off the plane. They're at Heathrow Airport, and they walk off the plane, and the cuffs are slapped on them because of something that they've said. Here in America, we don't do that. Now, you're probably going to be pilloried in the press and, on YouTube and, all of that. But generally speaking, nobody is going to give you a brand new set of really shiny bracelets just because of something that you say or something that you believe. There are many countries in the rest of the world where they don't have that right. In fact, there are no other countries that have the freedom of speech, that have the First Amendment, that allow me to do precisely what I'm doing this morning and speak my mind. And so just think about that. Now, there is a really cool article that I found this morning on Breitbart. And this one is entitled The America First Economics of the Declaration of Independence. And it's a fairly long article, but we're going to go through part of it. But it's on Breitbart News this morning. You can go find it if you go to their front page. But here's how it begins. The rising rhetoric and relentless reasoning of the Declaration of Independence retain as much of their power to inspire as they had back in 1776. Now, this is how it starts, and every time it's happening right now, every time I go to read this document, I get chills. So just listen to this, and we're going to read part of the Declaration of Independence a little bit later on in the program. We're going to get through the stack a little bit. So hopefully it gives you the same chills that it does me, but just listen to this. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have, see, and I'm already tearing up, to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to those opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to their separation. And listen to this next part. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Oh my God, my friends. There are a couple of documents in world history that will never be rivaled. One, of course, is the Bible. That's number one on the list. But the next one is the Declaration of Independence. And then the one that follows it is the Constitution. Now, many of my British friends would say, well, no, it is the Magna Carta that started it. Yeah, well, the original version of the Magna Carta only related to barons. It was nobility still. But it was Americans, us, that put pen to paper and wrote these words. So the audacity of the argument for American independence is based on the deepest principles and the Declaration's claims about the nature of humanity and of government, and the almost miraculous brevity in which Thomas Jefferson set them forth, have made it one of the most celebrated political statements in history. The United States themselves are essentially the greatest poem, wrote Walt Whitman, and the Declaration contains the opening verse. Jefferson and the original American revolutionary leaders did more than set forth the broad philosophic principles of the political democracy in the Declaration. They also enumerated the trespasses of the British government that necessitated the dissolution of its political bands to the American colonies, the particular grievances that justified the revolution, and the list of, quote, injuries and usurpations gets a lot less attention. But understanding it is crucial to understanding the meaning of this great country. That among the 27 particular grievances, 4 of them might be considered broadly economic in nature. The Founding Fathers complained that Britain had kept them economically dependent by denying the colonies control of migration, land settlement, trade, and taxation. They complained that the British government officials were living off of their labor and harassing their businesses. Quote, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states obstructing the laws of the naturalization of foreigners. He has erected a multitude of new offices and set hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. These are foundational principles to this republic, my friends. How often have you heard those words? How often have you heard those ideas that he has imposed taxes on us without our consent? How many times does that happen today? Are taxes imposed on you without your consent? Oh, sure, we all vote for taxes, right? We talked about one of them last night at the debate. In Sheridan, it's called the GPET tax, the General Purpose Excise Tax. Sure, we get a voice in that one. But we don't get a voice where our money goes to, and often it ends up in the hands of nonprofits that probably many of us would not support on our own. But instead, we've got this general purpose tax that lets our government give it to whomever they want. Now, we could make an argument that that is taxation without our consent. Why should I have to pay for little rainbow tote bags for public health? I shouldn't have to, right? I don't support that. Why should I pay for Nordic skiing? Yeah, that's one of the things that the county commissioners here gave money to. I don't ski. I don't like being cold. I don't want to pay for that. But because we passed that dumb GPET tax, well, now I'm forced to. So these things still happen today. But think about the brilliance of Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and James Madison in writing these words. Now, Jefferson wrote most of them, and interestingly enough, he was the youngest of the bunch. He was 33 years old when he was on the committee to draft the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin was probably considered to be one of the wisest men in the colonies at that time, and he had been a publisher for 50 years. He published Poor Richard's Almanac, though he hadn't in a little over 20 years by the time the Declaration was written. Benjamin Franklin ended up being basically the copy editor of the Declaration, and he didn't make that many changes. Some of the broader changes happened when they were debating the Declaration of Independence. Now, a couple of the changes that Franklin did make is he changed what Jefferson had written as sacred and undeniable truths. He changed that to self-evident. And he made some other grammatical changes, but really the bulk of what Jefferson wrote was there when they dropped off the Declaration June 28th of 1776, and they said, "Here you go, boys, let's get to work." It was then that a lot of the changes were made, and one of the biggest ones comes from one of the opening lines, and let me read it to you again. That we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. The original version read that among those are life, liberty, and property. Property rights are the foundation of one of the biggest foundations of liberty, my friends. If you don't have the right to own property, you don't have freedom at all, and that goes to the very heart of one of the reasons why people came to the New World, is because back in Europe, You were a serf. You were a peasant. You didn't own property. You were a subject of the king or the potentate or the czar or whatever their name was. You lived at the pleasure of whomever it was that was in power. Here, you have property rights. Now, certainly in Great Britain, there were, they had made some advances over other countries, but still, you were still a peasant. You were still a serf. You still served at the pleasure of the king. Everybody did. That what was yours was actually the king's, not here. So the reason why Thomas Jefferson wrote Life, Liberty, and Property is that is one of the foundational principles of individual liberty. Now, why did they change it? Because most of the founders were against slavery. Now, I know that this is a big argument among historians that, well, they were all slave owners, which makes them old, racist white guys. Well, yeah, a lot of them did have slaves, but a lot of them tried to get rid of them, tried to abolish the slave trade, and were told by King George that they couldn't. George Washington tried multiple times in the Virginia House of Burgesses, and a couple of times it passed, but King George told them no. And as I'm going to read you later on in the program, Thomas Jefferson, oh, yeah, that evil slave owner, the guy that didn't release his slaves when he died. Yeah, he was a terrible racist white guy. Yeah, wait until you hear what he wrote for the original draft of the Declaration that was taken out because they needed the support of the southern states. And if there was a prohibition on slavery, well, they wouldn't have the support. And so the brilliance of our founders changed life, liberty, and property to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness because they knew that if that word property was enshrined in our founding documents, in this document, in the Declaration of Independence, then the guys in the South would say, see, it says property. These slaves are our property. Therefore, you can't get rid of slavery. That's the principal reason why they changed the word property to the pursuit of happiness. Now, what these complaints show, the complaints in the Declaration of Independence, what they show is that the American colonists had learned that they could not depend on a far-off power for reasonable economic policies that would encourage prosperity and growth, but would have to look out for themselves. They had to stop being colonists in the Americas, and they had to become Americans. It was a declaration of economic sovereignty as well as political sovereignty. The Declaration was our announcement that from now on, when it came to the governments and the economies of the American states, America would come first. You can make no other argument on this point, my friends, that it had to be Americans first. Just as the British did not welcome this announcement of sovereignty in 1776, I can imagine when this letter, and here's the thing, news took so long to get from point A to point B. And there were ships traveling between the colonies all the time. The king probably knew that something like this was happening, but it wasn't official until he had the document in his hands. But he probably knew ahead of time that hey, something's coming. And the relationship between Great Britain and the colonies had been deteriorating for a really long time. The Boston Tea Party, anyone, where several tons of tea were dumped into the harbor. Which, I mean, that wasn't a giant, and here's the problem with history. We can only look back from our perspective into the past, and nobody that was alive then is alive now, and so really all we have is with things that they wrote down. And so we have to try to examine what was happening in the context of which it was happening. And so the Boston Tea Party, it probably wasn't this big giant Trump rally that we see now. It wasn't, huge crowds. They did it in the middle of the night. I mean, they disguised themselves and they dumped all the tea into the harbor. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was one more protest. And then it was the Stamp Act that in order to do any sort of commerce, you had to have a stamp on it. Now, what about the no taxation without representation? I just read it to you a little bit ago for imposing taxes on us without our consent. Well, really, that wasn't that big of a complaint at the time, because if you do the math, the taxes that the British Crown was charging the colonies, charging the average citizen, was equal to $1 a year. Now, $1 back then was a heck of a lot of money. Okay, so, I don't know. You can probably try to use one of those inflation calculators, though it probably won't go back to 1776. But was $1 a lot of money then? Yeah, but it was still only $1 a year. And it wasn't, it turns out, one of the chief complaints. It was a complaint among many. And so it was included in all the complaints in the Declaration of Independence, and certainly it is important, but it wasn't the important one. So just as the British did, I just read that to you, the central injury, the 14th of the 27, is telling. It is a complaint that the British have been quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. This was one of the biggest ones, and let me just describe how this would work. That the British would show up at your house and they would say, hey, you're going to play host to these soldiers here. And that was it. And you had to feed them and you had to take care of them. And they were living out of your house and they were planning probably the destruction of your friends and neighbors. But there was nothing that you could do about it, that you had to quarter these people. Now, this is also in the Constitution, which tells you how important this was. The Third Amendment to the Constitution is no quartering of soldiers. Now, we probably don't have to worry about that now unless you happen to be married to one, which is a totally different scenario. But that's the Third Amendment to the Constitution. It's number 3 in the Bill of Rights, just under the right to keep and bear arms. Second to the First Amendment. So that tells you how important that was. Now, to the founding generation, quartering meant billeting soldiers among civilians, forcing a civil community to house, supply, and live under the presence of troops. It was an invasion of the property rights of Americans and a forcible reminder that we lacked sovereignty. Why was this at the heart of the list? Because our forefathers understood that if we were going to rise among colonial dependence, we needed to be free from the mechanisms of foreign control. Now, there is also something even more profound and more fundamental that we can glimpse while reviewing the forgotten back half of the Declaration. The list of injuries and usurpations is itself a statement that the bounties of American economy do not belong to xenoarchists, that those who would rule us from abroad. Our government and our economy should be arranged so that our lives and our fortunes are most our own. And the reason for that, as the Declaration explains, is that we are not a race made of service to our betters, but men and women created equal to the princes and principalities. Herman Melville alluded to this in Moby Dick when his narrator explained why his book would ascribe to the meanest mariners, renegades, and castaways qualities both high and dark. Quote, "But this august dignity I treat of is not the dignity of kings and robes, but that abounding dignity which has no robed investiture. Thou shalt see it shining in the arm that wields a prick or drives a spike, that demographic dignity which on all hands radiates without end from God himself." It's a tune we've never really stopped humming as we Americans march through history. I've been a-wondering, why can't we do that all over? Throw out the cops that ain't our people. All work together to do our own thing, Tom Joad says in John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Now, on Independence Day, we're called to remember that the cause of throwing out and keeping out the cops that ain't our people is never done. Now, I'm not talking about policemen and cops that we envision them today. I'm referring to the quartering of soldiers in your own home. Every generation has to do that all over. And it is throwing off the shackles of government out of your daily life. Now, it was said in the debate last night, now, we're not in favor of no government. We all understand that government is necessary. At best, it is a necessary evil. But there are just some things that you can't do yourself. You can't pay for a water line or a sewer line to get to service your own home. We have to do that as a community, and we need a police force. But the point the author is making in this article, is to say that it is ever your duty to resist the political tyranny that will always come, whether it comes from your city council or your county commissioners or from Cheyenne or your other state capital, or if it comes from D.C. That is the very point behind the Second Amendment, that an armed populace cannot truly be controlled. And what was one of the main things that the British Crown tried to do to the colonists? Disarm them. Because if you don't have any weapons, you can't fight back. And if you can't fight back, then you have to do what the king says. You know, my friends, the Declaration of Independence has just as much relevance today as it did in 1776. All we have to do is read it and pay attention to it. Let's take another break, and we'll be back in a minute. The calendar says that it's summer, and you believe it. Oh, that's just so cute. But you obviously haven't lived here very long, have you? And you probably think that the weather is just going to continue to warm up. You don't have to worry about snow or ice or 30-degree temperatures anymore. In case you've forgotten, this is Wyoming, my friend, and that sort of thinking doesn't work here. 1 minute, it could be 75 and sunny, and 10 minutes later, snow. Whatever the weather, you need a pair of socks that'll keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And if you happen to run into that spring snowstorm, you'll stay nice and toasty warm. Well, your feet anyway. To get you a pair, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. These are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the last year and a half been more than you could bear? Well, if it has, you've come to the right place. Call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only getting stronger, my friends. The Cowboy State Politics Podcast, this program, Cowboy State Politics Live, and the Open Range Record. Who knows how far it's going to go. Hopefully really far, and so I can exact confiscatory advertising rates out of it. By the way, if you are running for public office and you want to talk to Wyoming conservatives, there's only one way that you do that. It's on this program. If you want to talk to Wyoming conservatives, most of them listen to Cowboy State Politics, and so if you want to advertise on the program, go ahead and shoot me an email, david@cowboystatepolitics.com. Or if you're interested in advertising on the Open Range Record, that address is editor@openrangerecord.com. So I mentioned earlier that there are a whole bunch of things that happen in other places in the world that don't happen here. And often we get, we get pretty ticked off at what our city councils do, what the county commissioners do, what those jokers in Cheyenne push through or don't push through, as the case may be, or what happens in Washington, D.C., though we seem to be somewhat removed. We're not immune. We're just a little bit removed from what happens in D.C. It takes, generally speaking, the way I've charted it, it takes about 2 months for whatever happens in other places of the country to make it here. But it doesn't really matter what the bad thing is that happens here. America is still not like the rest of the world, and let me prove it to you. Also from Breitbart News, Sharia law. An Indonesian woman collapses during flogging for kissing her partner on TikTok. And I quote, the woman was publicly caned in the Islamic Sharia law-dominated Aceh province of Indonesia after being accused of kissing her partner during a social media live stream. She was reportedly the first person in the area to receive the punishment for such actions online, and her male partner was also caned. Now, the outlet said the woman was accused of, quote, committing obscenity live with a man on social media. Imagine what would have happened if it would have been with another woman. You see, that's something that happens pretty regularly here, but apparently not in Indonesia. Video footage recorded the scene showed the woman's face contorting in pain as she kneeled. Now, I'm not going to show you those pictures. However, I will show you a picture of her being prepared for the caning. And just so I can prove to you, other things that happen in the world do not happen here. Where is it? There it is. There we go. Okay, there you go. And so, Indonesian woman preparing to be caned. Let me just expand this so you can see it, make sure. Oh, see how civilized they are. I mean, why wouldn't we want to have radical Muslims running parts of this country? Really? I mean, it would just be great. Not so much. You see, my friends, even the worst things that happen in America do not amount to getting caned because you kissed your boyfriend online. And God help you if you kissed your girlfriend. Now, I don't describe to any of that, but you're not going to get caned for doing it because you have the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech in this country, listed in the Constitution and brought to you courtesy of the Declaration of Independence. Need I say any more on that subject? And so, because I'm so excited about July 4th, and I mean, you all, if you've listened to this program long enough, you know that this is my favorite day of the year. Now, there was an original, as you can imagine, there was an original draft of the Declaration of Independence, and it was written largely by Thomas Jefferson and edited by Benjamin Franklin. I told you that just a minute ago. Now, there are a number of things that didn't make it to the final cut that were left on the cutting room floor, as it were. Now, I'm just going to read you the opening lines of the Declaration, and then we'll talk about a couple of the things that are in the original Declaration that just didn't make it to the final movie premiere. Here's how it reads. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for a political people to advance from that subordination in which they have hitherto remained, and to assume among the powers of the earth the equal and independent station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to those opinions of mankind require that they should declare the causes which impel them to the change. We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable, that all men are created equal and independent, and that from that equal creation they derive rights inherent and inalienable, among which are the preservation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property, I should add, that to secure these ends, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government shall become destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as they shall deem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing, I'm getting chills again, by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. And when a long train of abuses and usurpations begun at the distinguished period and pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to subject them to arbitrary power, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity that which constrains them to expunge their former systems of government. The history of his present majesty is a history of unremitting injuries and usurpations, among which no one fact stands single or solitary to contradict the uniform tenor of the rest, all of which have in direct object the establishment of an obsolete tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world, for the truth of which we pledge a faith yet unsullied by falsehood. Wow, right? But you remember, I mean, you can notice the changes in what Jefferson wrote. That yes, there were things were kind of whittled down a little bit, but the essential, the essence of those words is there. How incredible, my friends! Now let me read to you. And by the way, even if you read the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, it's 4 pages long. How many articles do I reference on this program from the Cowboy or other media outlets that are 7, 8, 10, 12 pages long? How many of those? How many times do you sit down to write something? Maybe it's a letter to the editor, perhaps it's an op-ed you hope the newspaper will publish, and you find it difficult to whittle down your thoughts to just a couple of pages because there's so much that you want to say. They were able to do it in 4 pages, okay? Now, I'm not saying anything about your writing ability. I'm saying that the brilliance of the founders cannot be denied, that they were able to list all of the trains of abuses and usurpations, as Jefferson put it, in 4 succinct pages. Now, at the time, they didn't really have typewriters, okay? So all of these were handwritten, and they were handwritten on big, giant pieces of parchment. And so what we have, the typewritten pages of 4 pages, I mean, it was quite longer. It was a big piece of paper. And imagine getting a letter that's that big, right? That is delivered to you and it's all rolled up and it's about yay long, and you have to unroll it and read it all the way down. Imagine that. But they were able to succinctly put all of their ideas down. Now I want to read you, and most of the complaints are the same, though the wording has changed around a little bit because this was letter by committee, and it was 56 different people that had their input into this. And so imagine, most committees today, if you set up a committee of 5 people, you're not going to be able to probably decide on anything, right? It's going to be very difficult. Everybody's got their own ideas on how to do things. Now, just imagine that, right? You're in a committee of 56 people, not 5, 56, and you already know, well, 5 people can't get anything done. How the heck are we going to accomplish anything with 56? And the subject matter of the document that you're producing is to separate your country from another one. Would we be able to do that today? Would we be able to cram 56 people into a room and make that decision today and whittle down all of their thoughts into one document? Would we be able to do that today? I suggest that if we actually put our minds to it, we could. But imagine the humility that you would have had to impose upon yourself to get this done. Imagine the frame of mind you would have to be in to put all of your personal thoughts and biases aside and produce a document that would set in motion the greatest country this world has ever known. Could you do that? These people did. And I think that this speaks to how incredibly intelligent they were, how forward-thinking they were, how deep of an understanding they had of the essential rights of man. And one more comment on this. Most of them were not educated at a big school, a big university. Most of them had not gone to Harvard. Most of them were self-educated. Now, a few of them had gone to, an institute of higher learning. We did have colleges and universities, though they're not have any sort of resemblance to what we have now. But there were a few of them, but most of them were self-educated. They read the works of the great political minds of their time and before. The philosophers, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who, by the way, was probably the first socialist, Montesquieu. All of them had read them, and all of them were read their Bible consistently. Because if you look through the Constitution and you know your Bible, you can find a lot of Deuteronomy in there. Many. And you know, and Jefferson even pays homage to that. The laws of nature and of nature's God. They knew who they had to have on whose team they had to be on for this to be successful. Because, I mean, it was 13 colonies. How were they going to defeat the greatest military on the face of the globe without the help of God? They knew that if they were not on his side, they were not going to be successful. Okay, so let me go and read you just a couple of and like I said, most of the complaints are pretty much the same. Most of them made it past the cutting room floor. But I want to read you one section that was not included. Now listen to this, and it's hard to listen to without reading it, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. Now this was all Thomas Jefferson, the evil white slave owner guy that he was a racist and terrible, and you know all of the terrible things that the left says about him. Listen to this. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating them and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, this opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king. Now, Christian is in all capitals. This warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain. Now, he's insulting the king right now is what he's doing, because he's saying this guy who claims to be a Christian did all of this. That is the implication and why it is capitalized in the original document. It is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain. Determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold, he has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce. And this assemblage of horrors might want no fact of distinguished dye. He is now exciting these very people to rise in arms against us and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them, and murdering the people upon whom he has obtruded them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with the crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble of terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered by repeated injury. Now, this part makes it in, but it is the section about slavery that didn't make it into the final one. And I mean, it's pretty obvious why it didn't, because they needed the support of the southern colonies who were slaveholding colonies. And without them, they were not going to be successful, and they needed it to be unanimous. And so this made it to the cutting room floor. Now, remember, I mentioned that the terms life, liberty, and property were in there. Okay, so in Jefferson's original version, it says pursuit of happiness. Well, when it got to to Independence Hall, I mean, there was a lot of debate, and it was decided the property can't be in there because of this little problem. Now, again, you're going to argue, well, Jefferson, big giant hypocrite, he had slaves. Okay, well, you have to understand what was going on at the time. The king would not allow them to get rid of their slaves. He would not allow them to outlaw the slave trade. Thomas Jefferson tried it. George Washington tried it, and he just wouldn't allow it. Now, how do we get past the apparent hypocrisy of Jefferson? Well, you have to understand it in the times. Now, and the best way to understand this is to think about the time in which it was written. And you find that, and you find this in the most important line in the Declaration of Independence. And it's in the original version just as much as it is in the one that was sent to King George. And it says, now he puts it a little bit differently, but let me just read you, let me find the beginning of this. You know what, I'll just read you the last paragraph. How's that? We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these states reject and renounce all allegiance and subjection to the kings of Great Britain and all others who may hereafter claim by, the, through, and under them, that we utterly dissolve and break off all political connection which may have hereto subsisted between us and the people or Parliament of Great Britain. And finally, we do assert and declare that these colonies to be free and independent states, and that as a free and independent states, they shall hereafter have power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, and establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Okay, that is the most important line in the Declaration of Independence, my friends. That's the most important one. That to accomplish this task, they would have to pledge to each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And though it is not an excuse, and though it is not one that I like, they did that, and it destroyed many of them. And so, in George Washington's case, he couldn't release his slaves, or it would have left him penniless. I know, we don't like that, that answer. But he did free them on his death, and arguably being a slave, still being a slave under George Washington, but it was far better than being in the southern colonies. And so you have to look at history in the context at which it was made. You can't take our values and our beliefs of today and judge the past by them. That's called historiography, and it creates a skewed and oftentimes absolutely wrong view of what happened. Now, the truth about America, my friends, is that America is great because America is good, and here is the linchpin in all of it. Have we done some bad things in our history? Yes. Yes, we have. Slavery, horrible, inexcusable, terrible. But have we done some really, really good things? Yes, we have. We are the people that the world waits for. That we are the people that created the most charitable, the most giving, the most powerful, the wealthiest, and the most free nation that this world has ever known. America is great because America is good. And yes, we've done some bad things, but we always fix them, and let me prove it to you. Now, again, there's a great contradiction here, that these guys, the very person that wrote this document, okay, he was a slave owner, but he also wrote that incredible paragraph that didn't make it into the final version. That these are his beliefs. And this is not something that you can just write out on your Facebook page and then take back a week later. You can't go, Jefferson couldn't go delete this post, as many people do when they're called out for something wrong that they've written. Once pen hit the paper, this was it. This was it, my friends. There was no taking this back. And so, you don't write something like, you don't call the Christian king of Great Britain out and accuse him of execrable commerce. You know what execrable means? Poop. That's what he meant. That it is crappy commerce, and that it is against the laws of nature and of nature's God. The opprobrium of infidel powers that are not of God, is what he's saying. So judge the past by the past. Don't judge the past by today's values, because you're going to come up with something entirely different. So they couldn't get this thing passed without the unanimous support of all of the colonies, which meant there had to be a little give and take with the southern colonies. So what did they do? Well, when the Revolutionary War was over and the Constitution was being, after the Articles of Confederation, and after we realized that was an absolute joke and that was not going to work, the Constitutional Convention started. And they still had the slaveholding states there. Now, what the very first thing that they did is they changed the voting threshold from unanimous, which it was at the when they were writing the Declaration. They had to have the unanimous support of all the colonies. They knew that their constitution wouldn't pass unanimously. One reason is because Rhode Island, was not going to attend, and they didn't attend the Constitutional Convention, so it couldn't be unanimous. And so they changed it instead of unanimous to 3/4. But that also allowed them to slip in some things into the Constitution that would absolutely do away with slavery. Now, this is one of the big, giant liberal lies about this country, the 3/5 compromise. So in there, the other side claims that proves that the Constitution is a pro-slavery document. It says that that a black person is only 3/5 of a person. And that means that these people were a bunch of old white slave-holding racists. It doesn't prove that at all, because it related to representation. You see, representation in Congress is determined upon population. And at the time the Constitution was written, the population of the northern states, which were largely abolitionist states, was growing faster than the population in the southern colonies. And so the guys in the north, they decided that, and originally, and this is another important point, that voting was dependent upon property. Okay, you were able to vote based upon how much property you had and the population thereof. And so when this question of representation came up, it I guess devolved into a giant argument at the convention. And the guys in the South were like, property, eh? We got a lot of property. This is going to be great. And the guys in the North were going, oh, crap, that was kind of a mistake. And so it was right at the end of the day, and it was a big, giant argument anyway. And so they adjourned for the day. And they both went to their respective camps, and they wrote out, lists of their property. And the guys in the North made sure that their list of property was much larger than the guys in the South. And so they showed up, and they decided, oh, wait, no, this whole property thing isn't going to work. It's not really going to work for us, so we need to change it around. Let's do it on population. And so they debated that for a while. And the argument came up, now, wait a minute, you guys down there, you have a lot of people, and most of them are slaves, and they're not even citizens anymore anyway, and so we can't allow that. And so the compromise was that the population of slaves in the South would amount to 3/5 of the total population. And that compromise, and the reason why the guys in the North did it, is they knew that their population was growing faster than the southern states, and so that eventually they would be able to outlaw slavery. And so the 3/5 compromise was put into the Constitution, and it is the greatest historical time bomb ever created. Think about it, right? And after this whole thing was agreed upon, can you imagine the conversation afterwards? The guys in the North, they go off to their own tavern, and can you just think about it? They were probably laughing amongst themselves, going, "Oh, we really got those guys! Wasn't that amazing? I can't believe they went for that one." But truly incredible. Now, the other part of the compromise appears in Article 5 of the Constitution, when that part talks about amendments. And so there's only a couple of things in Article 5 that they say you can't amend out of the Constitution, either by a convention of states or by the other method, that is Congress proposing an amendment. And one of those is you can't outlaw slavery before 1808. That was the date that they chose. And so after 1808, absolutely, we could do it if you got the votes. And the guys in the North knew that their population would exceed the population of the southern states. Therefore, they would have more representation in Congress, and eventually they would be able to get rid of slavery. Cool, huh? Absolutely amazing. I just love history. All right, my friends. Well, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to continue on with the program. I've got some other articles I want to talk to you about, and I'll probably find another piece in the Declaration to read to you. So we'll do that after a quick break. Thank you for joining me on July 3rd. Keep the comments coming, and if you want to call me, it's Open Line Friday, 307-374-8989. Back in a minute. Are you sick to death of being told what to think? Maybe you don't even realize that it's happening. Freedom Caucus bad, big spending, big government, liberal, Republican good. Conservatives are bad and they want to starve little children. I have heard it all, my friends. We are way past the time when the news was just the news, if it ever was. But wouldn't it be nice if you had a news platform that was at least honest about what they were telling you? News on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. That's exactly what the Open Range Record is. Go to the website, openrangerecord.com. News, analysis, opinion, and investigative journalism. One more time, that website is openrangerecord.com. You can listen and watch Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble every Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pay attention to all that other block-headed, Borg-like so-called news if you want. But if you want to get the real story, watch Cowboy State Politics live. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Cowboy State Politics live on July 3rd, the day before Independence Day. One of our viewers, Tony, he says, you're touching on exactly why a constitutional convention would be a big, giant train wreck. And you are exactly right, Tony. That when you get to, if we were to start a constitutional convention, and I wasn't intending on going here, but since you brought it up, why not talk about it? So if we were to call a constitutional convention, imagine all of the interests that would be there. Imagine on all of the different things that would be brought up. And here is the biggest problem. When you would start it, then they decide on the rules. That's the very first thing that happens in any deliberative body, whether it is your city council or whether it is your county commission or the legislature or even Congress. The very first thing they do is they set the rules. And it happens down in Cheyenne. And let me just give you a couple of them. So a couple of the rules, a few of them are kind of ridiculous. So in the legislature, there's no smoking. But you can demand a spittoon on the floor. I'm not even joking. So in the rules, it says if you need a spittoon, all you need to do is ask the presiding officer, and they will bring you a spittoon. It is absolutely the case, and occasionally it happens down there. Also, there are dress codes in the rules. Gentlemen have to wear a tie. You have to wear slacks. You can't wear jeans. They had to change the whole tie thing along the way because some of them wanted to wear bolo ties. That's a thing down in Cheyenne. I guess they're easier to put on than a tie. Maybe some of those people can't have trouble tying a necktie. I don't know. But you can wear a bolo tie. Well, so you could make up any rules that you want. And at the original Constitutional Convention, they did that very thing. They couldn't get it passed unanimously. They knew that. And so the first thing they did is they changed the rules so that it could be 3/4 instead of unanimous. And if you don't think the rules are going to be changed when a constitutional convention kicks off, you are absolutely mistaken. Now, I know there are some people that listen to this program that absolutely believe in a convention of states, and they will say, no, that will never happen. It's all good people that go to these things, and it's everything is going to go according to plan. Well, it didn't go according to plan the first time around because the original Constitutional Convention didn't have anything to do with the new Constitution. The only authority that they were given was to revise the real crappy Articles of Confederation. But they had already decided before the darned thing convened that they weren't going to do that. The guys from Virginia had already written the Virginia Plan. It was already written before they got to the Constitutional Convention, even though every single one of them knew that the only authority they had was to fix the Articles of Confederation. And so they get to the convention, and they say, hey, guys, we've come up with this great plan, and we wrote it ahead of time, And we don't know if you guys are going to like it or not, but we're just going to present it anyway. So after we change the rules to let us do what we want, then we're just going to take the Articles of Confederation and do that with them. And that's what they did. And so you should have no illusions that that's what would happen if we stupidly started another constitutional convention. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons for it that we could get into. But that's for a different show. I'm just not feeling the whole talking about the Article 5 convention today. What I do want to tell you, though, is I want to go back to, you know what? Let's have some fun first. So remember when our pal Mamdani was running for to be the mayor of New York, and he said this:
"We will draw this city closer together. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. If our campaign demonstrated that the people of New York yearn for solidarity, then let this government foster it.
Let this government foster the warmth of collectivism and not the frigidity of rugged individualism where you can buy your own air conditioner. No, my friends, the warmth of collectivism means that we have to have your air conditioner set at 78 degrees. Now, I'm not one that likes a really super cold house. In fact, the lovely Christine and I, this is one of our ongoing debates in the house, how cold is it going to be, ceiling fans, all of that. It's a long deal, but we compromise. That's what we do. But not in New York. No. In New York, the Mayor Mamdani has said that, we don't need your air conditioner to be set above 78 degrees because you see the power grid just can't support it. And so we're asking you to set it at 78 degrees.
Every business owner, please set your thermostats to 78 degrees to alleviate the stress on our power grid. Every worker in New York City has the right to a safe workplace, and that includes safety in extreme heat. For New Yorkers looking for other ways to stay cool, our Parks Department offers hundreds of stray showers and thousands of drinking fountains across the 5 boroughs. They also maintain about 50 free outdoor swimming pools with general hours of operation between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. And during the heat emergency, Olympic and intermediate-sized pools will be open until 8.
Yeah. So you can't turn your air conditioner below 78 degrees. But what you can do, you can go to the swimming pool. And if you want, you can go down to the fire station and you can get them to turn on your fire hydrant. But don't you dare turn your thermostat below 78 degrees. The warmth, and I hope all these people in New York and Colorado, they're voting for all these socialists, I hope you have an idea of what is coming. Because collectivism, socialism, communism, they all lead to one place: collective misery. And because eventually you run out of other people's money to spend, and you're going to do whatever the people at the top tell you to do. Now, make no mistake, Mayor Mamdani's thermostat is not set at 78 degrees, nor is it 78 degrees in City Hall. But your thermostat, absolutely, you better set it to 78 degrees. And if you don't, well, then that's your fault, and you are going to be punished. Welcome to socialism, my friends. I mean, how could you want it any differently? The warmth of collectivism. Oh, and by the way, while we're on this whole Mamdani thing, I see no reason why we should stop there. Remember the frigidity of rugged individualism. You should forget about that because it's not going to turn out that way.
This new age will be defined by a competence and a compassion that have too long been placed at odds with one another.
Oh, yeah.
We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
No problem too big for government to solve and no concern too small for government to think. Don't you dare kiss your boyfriend on TikTok unless we say you can. That's where you're headed, my friends. I hope you enjoy it. John Fetterman, I have to admit, I'm not often wrong about politicians. In fact, I have a pretty good track record of hitting the nail squarely on the head in that department. But one of those was John Fetterman. I figured that guy was going to be a radical. That's how he campaigned. And then he had, and miracles of, and I'm going to ascribe this to a miracle of God, albeit a minor one. But God works in mysterious ways. And so John Fetterman had a stroke, and now he's not so radical anymore. In fact, he's probably the most reasonable one of the Democrats. Now, on Wednesday's broadcast of the Fox News Hannity program, Fetterman said that Democrats are nominating far-left candidates because most of them don't feel pride in America. And it must be pretty miserable to be a Democrat. I mean, think about it. Think of all the Democrats, there is always an injustice to face. There is always an oppressor, and there was always an oppressed. You're always looking at the negative side of things, guys, and you just got to be miserable. And every Democrat I know, they're hardly ever in a good mood. Even Carly Provenza, when she's walking around the Capitol, she's usually got a smile on her face. But when she gets up to talk, man, there is no injustice too small for her to go after, and she is so angry about all of them. And I just think that if you're a Democrat, you're just generally an unhappy person. And most of them don't have pride in this country, probably because most of them were educated in public schools and never took the chance to crack a book open and read it. And read who our founders were, what they believed, what they thought, why they wrote the things that they did, why they did the things that they did. If you do that, you can't come away with any other conclusion other than they were some pretty awesome people that believed in human liberty and human freedom. But there's a group of them that they just hate America. So let me play for you a segment of Fetterman on Sean Hannity. It's a pretty long segment. We won't watch all of it, but we'll just hit the high points. Here it is.
Reaction, Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman. I think I know you pretty well. I don't think you want to abolish the police. I don't think you want to abolish prisons. I don't think you want to take away people's homes. I don't think you want Democrats seizing the means of production. I don't think you want criminals that commit rape and murder that are here illegally not deported. Am I wrong?
Oh, well, of course, Sean. And now the ones that difference between me and other Democrats, we're a Democrat that's willing to call out these individuals and some of the absurd things that they have said and the kinds of beliefs they are. The one thing that absolutely is in common, just contempt for Israel, that essentially is becoming just rank anti-Semitism. The individual that just won in Colorado, she refused to describe the situation where someone firebombed a group of Jews that was just rallying for the Israeli hostages at that time and killed a woman. She refused to even address that. Is that anti-Semitic? So this is the point. And now there's that strong correlation. Anti-Israel, drifting into anti-Semitism, very, very intensely anti-American. And now just here, that individual also believes America deserved 9/11. And of course, Israel deserved the massacre of 10/7. That's been building. When I was on Jesse's show back in early May, I said the Democratic Party we're heading for an orgy of socialism. And now look, and here we are for these things. So these very specific kinds of candidates.
An orgy of socialism, so says John Fetterman. I mean, it's a funny soundbite, but I think the main point of that is that he says that there's a whole bunch of people that just hate America, that they believe we deserved September 11th and that Israel deserved October 7th. I mean, none of those things are true, my friends. And if you believe those sorts of things, you have a really distorted view of what America is. And again, I can't say this enough, that America is the freest, the most charitable, the most powerful, the most wealthy, the most ingenuitive. country that this world has ever known. America gives far more money to every other place on the globe than any other country. And by the way, it is conservatives that are way more charitable. If you look at the numbers, it is Republicans and Republicans in general, and conservatives tend to be really, really charitable, way, 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 way more than the Democrat Party. And so and that's the thing, right? The Democrats have this belief that they are the charitable ones. Just listen to their rhetoric, right? They're the ones that are always saying that they're going to help people. We are the ones that are going to help you out of your misery. Yeah, and they never do. They're really good at creating misery. But when it comes down to it, they're not the people that are going to go help their neighbor. They're not the people that are going to donate to this cause or that cause. I mean, it's just not them. Conservatives, on the other hand, Republicans, we're way, way, way charitable people. And by the way, if you're in a bad mood and you happen to be a Democrat, and you just think that your life is just miserable, and you just have a very dim view of everything, and you've just been real depressed lately, I think the best thing to do is to go to a Republican event, talk to some people, maybe have a hot dog, watch a speech, listen to some music, whatever. Lots of Republican events are a lot of fun. Granted, some of us are a little nuts, but that's okay. That's what makes us individuals. But just go to an event, and then as a good first step, every recovery plan, if you I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I can tell you that you have to take that first step, and the first step is admitting that you have a problem. And so the way that you solve that, and I'm not saying cross over and vote, I'm saying admit that you have a problem, that perhaps being a Democrat is causing you all of this mindless depression. First, you have to decide that you're going to fix that you're tired of being miserable, and you're tired of being sad all the time. And so the very first thing you do is you go to a Republican event, and then hopefully you've heard some things that perhaps is going to make you crack open a book and maybe do a little bit of research. Maybe our founders weren't that terrible. Maybe they were actually some pretty good guys, and maybe they wrote a document that is one of the most important documents in world history, and maybe that it was the catalyst for the greatest amount of human freedom this world has ever known. And then once you have educated yourself on that, become a Republican. As there's a great great story that Ronald Reagan once told. I'm probably going to butcher it, but he had a little girl approach him, and he says, the little girl says, "Hey, Mr. President, there are these homeless people down around my neighborhood, and they really need some help." And Ronald Reagan says, "Yeah, that's really terrible. They really do need some help, but they could help themselves." And the little girl says, why don't you help them? And he says, well, I tell you what, why don't you come over to my house, and you can mow my yard, and you can sweep the driveway, and you can clean up around the house, and I will pay you $50 for doing that. And then you can take that $50 and you can go give it to the homeless people down the street. And the little girl looked at him with her beautiful young eyes, and she says, well, why don't the homeless people just come mow your yard and sweep your driveway? And he replied, welcome to the Republican Party. All right, my friends, it's a little bit early today, but it is July 3rd. And I, just like you, have got July 4th plans. And so we're going to say goodbye for today's installment of the broadcast. Cowboy State Politics Live will be back next Tuesday with another live program, and we'll continue on. But just do this. Take some time over the next couple of days to read the Declaration of Independence. It won't take you that long. It's 4 printed pieces of paper. That's it. It's way shorter than any of Claire McDuff's articles in the Cow Pie. You ought to be able to suck that one down in 5-6 minutes. But just go read it and think about the things that are written in there. And while you're at it, you may as well read the Constitution. It's pretty short too. But just take some time. Spend some time with your family. Talk about the things that make America this amazing place that it is. And just try to figure out why it is that we have become the good people that we are. That this country is the freest, the most charitable, the most powerful, the most giving, and the best country in this world. We are truly exceptional, my friends. Please, go enjoy July 4th. Have a good time with your families. Be safe. And we'll see you back. Don't forget about the podcast tomorrow. I've got a weekend update already planned. But for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson. On this July 4th, my friends, happy Independence Day. We'll see you next week. Happy July 4th. Party like it's 1776, my friends.